Hey, welcome everyone. Today we're talking about the 10 plus genetic causes for excess weight and exactly what to do about it. We're going to be covering about a dozen or so reasons why people have struggled to lose weight from the genetic standpoint. And there's a lot of reasons people don't realize may be involved that are why they're not able to drop weight. Broadly, the three main genetic reasons that people struggle with weight. Genetically, they put on inflammatory water weight, they put on hormonal toxic weight, or they put on caloric fat weight. And we're going to cover the details of all three of those. And just to make a fine point on it, this came out of a 10-year study out of Australia that they said that genetics contributes to 70% of someone's obesity. Now, I'm not saying everyone who's on the call here is obese, or if anyone has, that's not what I'm saying. It's that the study here is that people who have excess weight, 70% of it can be traced to genetics. So here are all of the reasons from the genetics that I'm aware of at this time. And we're going to cover each of them in efficiently. And the first one we have is inflammatory water weight. And there's these 5 reasons, which we'll go over in detail. Overinflammation, problems with vitamin D, salt sensitivity, histamine, food allergens. Then there's the toxic weight gain, where people have a problem detoxing alcohol, or they put on or hormonal weight. And then there's overeating calories, like eating the wrong types of carbs, caffeine-induced anxiety and depression, low satiety, craving taste of sugar, craving sugar, over-consuming sugar, preferring to add more fat to your food. And then there's the difficulty burning fat, which will be under the caloric fat weight. Now, all of these things I'm explaining in the context that you can do something about it. That the benefit of epigenetics, which is the style of genetics that I test for and the style of genetics that one should seek out, is that only work on the genes that you are empowered and have agency and can do something about. So when we look at genes, we are almost always, with one exception we'll cover today, looking at variations if someone is a green, yellow, or a red dot, meaning that do they have 2 bad copies of the gene, which is a red dot, 1 bad copy, 1 good, and 2 good copies. Now, it should be known that a yellow dot is not somewhere in the middle or comes from a benign version of a green dot. Almost always the yellow dot is a slightly less worse version of a red. So we treat yellows like reds, just slightly less worse. But the good news is that with proper lifestyle, the expression, when I created this image, it's in the style of this cone of light. The cone of light is showing that the red light can go into kind of the yellow-green area, the green light can go into the yellow-red area, and that has to do with lifestyle. So people who have a really good, consistent lifestyle, their red and yellow dots can behave more green-like. They will never be green, but they can behave green-like. And from the reverse, that you can have a green dot that you're having a terrible lifestyle, and then it's starting to express like a red dot. So this is empowering and requires personal responsibility and personal agency, and that you have a measure of control over your genes, though your genes do have a hard set point. That's the red and yellow green dot. We're first going to cover overinflammation. And overinflammation, now, if you've seen me on podcasts or summits or webinars before, you've seen this slide. This is what I call the muffin test, where if someone eats a little muffin and they put on 1 to 3 pounds within 24 hours, unless that muffin was last year's regifted Christmas fruitcake, it didn't weigh 1 to 3 pounds. What happened was that the inflammatory nature of what was in that muffin, the sugars, the dyes, the chemicals, the preservatives, the colorings, the whatever plastic weirdness got leached in from the little wrappy thing that they put the muffin in, whatever other junk that's in it, on it, or was made in the process, the gluten, whatever it might be, is triggering an inflammatory response in the body. If people are eating something that's inflammatory, the body will flood the area around it, called the interstitial. Stitial is a Greek Latin, I forget, for cell. Inter means, in between. It's the space in between the cells that flood it with water. That's why people swell up. It's the water going in between the cells. And that's inflammatory water weight, because the body is trying to buy time for the liver and kidneys to filter out and remove and detox the inflammatory chemicals that are lingering around the cells. So the mistake that people make is that when they get swollen from water weight, they think they have to exercise more and eat less. When in the reality is that a lot of times some people are so pro-inflammatory, if they over-exercise, they'll actually become hyper-inflammatory because the over-exercise will cross that invisible threshold into a pro-inflammatory. So the exercise itself will actually create excessive water weight. And I've actually presented at genetics conferences on this called exercise-induced obesity, where there's certain people who are so pro-inflammatory, they will put on excess weight. And I will show this very, very shortly. So in fact, it's the very next, you can see right here, the more you exercise, the fatter you get. And like you'll have this like puffy water link and water weight over your muscles, and they just look washed out. So this is a real client. And as you can, don't get lost in the hieroglyphics and hexadecimal, whatever jargon here. Just look at the red circles. These are all clusters around inflammation is in three parts: the initiation, sustaining, and clearing, meaning does it spark real quickly? Does it turn into a conflagration? When it does start, do you have trouble putting it out? Like, does your inflammatory genes, anti-inflammatory genes, are they fire hoses or squirt guns? And in this case, she had all three problems in all three areas. In particular, she had the three CRP genes, which code for the acute phase protein for inflammation, which is jargon for when you get inflamed, your liver gets extra inflamed. And the problem is that the liver is in charge of removing inflammation, but also detoxing the body. And she also had problems with clearing estrogen. So if you have a kitchen and you got to take out the garbage, but the kitchen is also on fire, what's the priority? The priority is you put out the fire, not take out the garbage, not detox. So the body will prioritize inflammation over detox. And what happens is that this is where it blends in with the hormonal toxic weight, where inflammatory and hormonal toxic weight can intersect, is that you have excess estrogen that builds up because the body can't detox it because the liver is overwhelmed with inflammation. And then you have increased belly fat from the excess estrogen. The excess belly fat actually will increase inflammation because visceral fat will just create inflammation, and then will then just continue the cycle, which is what happened with this client. And so what I did with her is pulled her off the excessive exercise, which, by the way, was a trigger for all this. She joined CrossFit without telling me. And this CrossFit idiot trainer just had her over exercise excessively 5 to 7 days a week, which is just super dumb. And she got over inflamed. Not only did she start putting on weight, losing muscle tone, and getting weaker as opposed to stronger, but her cycle went completely sideways. And that's because her estrogen levels got totally wonky, because she not only had genetic problems detoxing estrogen just to begin with, but her liver got so inflamed that it couldn't even detox what it could. And then for men, the two case studies I presented at the same conference, they had a similar profile. And for them, it's not that their cycles went off, but they developed man boobs. And because the excess estrogen in their system deposited the fat on their chest, because that's what estrogen does. So for all of them, it was removing the sources of inflammation, identifying and removing sources of excess estrogen, which we'll cover later in another slide, and then putting them on a liver-supporting, anti-inflammatory, anti-estrogen detox diet, and cutting down all the inputs of excess inflammation, like over-exercising and inflammatory foods and other things. So I know that may have been quite a lot of information, but the overall message is that if you have pro-inflammatory genetics and then you have a pro-inflammatory lifestyle, you will end up with excess fat. And then you throw on top of that problems with detoxing estrogen, you will actually involve the second cause at the same time. So in the same vein around inflammation, we're going to talk about vitamin D. So vitamin D is, in my opinion, the most important nutrient in the whole body next to like water. And because it controls about 1,000 genes, which ranges from 3 to 5% of your human genome. And the vitamin D, people think of it, oh, it helps build bone. Yeah, it's one thing it does. It's good. It's important. But the most important things that it does is it reduces inflammation and moderates the immune response. If you can't absorb it, I mean, you can synthesize it, you can consume it, you can make it from the sun, depending on your genes, if you can do it efficiently. You can eat foods with high vitamin D, or you can take supplements. But that just gets the vitamin D into the bloodstream. I'm talking about getting the vitamin D from the bloodstream into the cells where it actually does its work. Vitamin D is great, but if you can't get it into the cells, it's useless. So the vitamin D receptors genetically are the things that are the most important piece of the vitamin D journey, is to actually, it's a docking site where the vitamin D can land on the surface of the cell, then go into the cell and do its thing. Now, if you're like me and you have double red dots in the vitamin D receptor 1 and vitamin D receptor 2, it means I don't have an easy time using vitamin D. And just what I observed clinically after doing hundreds and hundreds of these tests, I observed that the people who struggled the most with chronic diseases were those that had red, yellow or red, especially red dots in vitamin D receptors. I then went to the chief scientist who designed this entire test and asked him to talk to his other top clinicians that have run hundreds and hundreds of tests, and also to check the big database of all the tests and see if that he also saw a pattern, the other clinician saw a pattern. And he came back to me and he said, absolutely, there's a pattern. Says the VDR variations in the vitamin D receptors absolutely correlate to chronic disease. And so, and I know we're talking about weight gain, but inflammation is also linked to not just weight gain, but to chronic diseases. So knowing what to do with if you have these vitamin D variations, if you know you have these, then there are very straightforward recommendations that can be done based on your genetics to help not change them, the red dots to green, but to make the red dot genes behave more green light, so you actually make more vitamin D receptors so that you can use vitamin D more efficiently to drop inflammation and improve your immunity. Next, we have salt sensitivity. Now, most people assume salt sensitivity is with blood pressure. That I don't see that so often. One, because there's so many reasons for blood pressure: height, weight, stress, smoking, alcohol consumption, sleep apnea, thyroid issues, adrenal, kidney issues, lack of exercise. All of those things have direct consequences on one's blood pressure, not just salt. What I do see is that people are sensitive to salt. If they don't have high blood pressure, a lot of these people with variations have water retention. And my former intern, Michaela, she's given me permission to talk about this. She's, when she was working with me, she was in her late 20s. She was an athlete, perfect diet. She's working with me. Like she has her master's in functional medicine and human nutrition. And she still had this swelling around her belly and her fingers. When she ran her genetics, she found out she was salt and histamine sensitive, which we'll talk about next. And once she reduced the salt, she didn't have high blood pressure, not even close, not even a chance. And once she reduced the salt and the histamine, the swelling in her fingers and around her belly went away. So her water weight had zero to do with calories. It didn't have to do anything with like overt inflammation. It had to do with the histamine and salt sensitivity. That's why I put inflammation under water retention, not water retention under inflammation, because there's other types of water retention that aren't related to inflammation. Next, we have histamine. And histamine, so histamine intolerances, this one's tough because there's so many, quote, healthy foods that are high in histamine, like avocado, really high quality chocolate, lemons and limes, citrus fruits, the kiwi, pineapple, vinegars, etc. There's a lot of things that are assumed to be healthy in certain ways, but food is complicated, and foods can be very healthy in certain ways and not very healthy for certain people based on their genetics and other ways. The thing about histamine is to just be honest with oneself. Like, are you dealing with headaches, itchy skin, runny nose, fatigue, hives, digestive issues, and the puffy weight gain? And then this is one of the most common things I find actually when I do genetics testing on people is people have histamine intolerance. And shifting the diet to an antihistamine diet, it's rough for people. I'm not going to lie. It's rough for people. This is probably the hardest diet to negotiate with people. You tell a Californian they can't have an avocado, they will lose their mind. They will lose their mind. So what I've put together was a massive antihistamine elimination diet. The elimination diet's in regards to the next slide on eliminating food allergens. And there's a column of foods that are good for both purposes, and then there's the naughty list, the bad foods. And just the way that I figured out how to negotiate with people in a way to make this doable, because dosage matters. Like if you cut the volume of the histamine foods you do eat by half, or you cut out half of the histamine producing foods you do eat, the dosage matters. So by reducing the volume, it does really help. So what I've done conceptually is tell people, okay, here's the long list of things that have histamine in it. There's three passes you're going to do. Number one, you're going to go through and cross off the things you don't eat already. So you feel victorious that you're already have not even involved in certain histamine-based foods. Number two, second pass is you're going to go through and you're going to cross off the things that you do eat, but are going to be really easy and not any emotional discharge or problems or anything to cut out. So like, what's the easy stuff to remove? Then the third pass is you go through and you pick the top 10 and you rank them, the very top 10 histamine involved foods that if you were to remove them would severely affect the quality of your life in whatever way. And then you eat those. And then you just cut out the other non-top 10 histamine foods that are still on the list. I'll give you examples of what I do. Like I enjoy chocolate, even though if I have too much, I will get headaches and I will get tired. And like chocolate definitely affects me. I have histamine intolerance. I have chocolate on there. I have ground meat. I have leftovers. I have pickles. I have tomatoes. I have occasionally some apple cider vinegar, lemon and lime. So I have like six, maybe seven things. That's my top 10. And I know when I'm overdoing it because I get headaches and my skin starts to itch. So that's how I have been able to successfully negotiate with people. Once I introduce those three passes, you cut out the stuff that you don't need anyway, you cross it off, you remove the stuff that's easy to get rid of, and then you pick your top 10 and remove the rest. Totally doable. And I've stopped having these arguments with people. It's made my life a lot easier too. So the histamine one's very significant, I find, for a lot of people when it comes to mystery puffy weight. Next, we have strong reactions to food allergens. So genetically, there are people that are really reactive to foods. Now, this test does not test for all the food allergens. What it does is it checks for general reactivity to food allergens in general. So meaning that if someone's a red or yellow dot, it's generally a good idea to go on a food elimination diet. Here are the major ones: avoiding peanuts and tree nuts, dairy, shellfish, soy, wheat, eggs, and fish. I have an asterisk around eggs. If they're really high quality, organic, pasture fed, really well raised chickens, eliminate those last if even necessary, because eggs are so nutrient dense and so convenient for so many reasons. I would hate for people to lose that option. I'd rather people focus on removing those. Now, obviously, if people have anaphylaxis to eggs, you don't have eggs, but you would have known that by now. So I see a lot of people have a combo of variations in histamine and in elimination and in the elimination elimination diet. So the antihistamine elimination diet is really, really, really useful. Next, we have the inability to detox alcohol well. So certain people genetically can't get rid of alcohol, and that creates by the way, it's just to make the direct connection, the food allergens that creates inflammation in the gut, which then creates that same water retention issue that then swells people up. So now we're in the toxic facts section, and there's people who can't detox alcohol well. And if you can't detox alcohol well, then it creates all sorts of problems in the liver, problems with getting rid of inflammation. You have people who've got those beer bellies, but even people who don't have beer bellies and that have problems with digesting alcohol, they create other problems for their liver, and they can get other toxic buildups. And the problem is that if your liver can't detox, then it will shove toxins into the fat cells, because the fat cells are the dirty closets of the body. So the backup to dealing with toxins is to throw it into fat cells and make the fat cells bigger. So people can be fat because not because they have calories, but because they have so much toxicity they can't get rid of. You're just chucking it all in the dirty closet. And, when it comes time to clean out that dirty closet, it can be a real mess. That's why people can have Herxheimer reactions or detox reactions. I had a colleague of mine in chiropractic school named Jim. He was a pilot, and he got horribly sick when he was in school, and he lost a bunch of weight like really quickly. And he was formerly a pilot, and all of those toxins from the fuel emissions, the stuff that's on the plane, the air, whatever, all of these toxins that were stored in his fat suddenly dumped all at once, and he lost his short-term memory. He couldn't remember where he lived. He couldn't remember his own phone number. It just messed with him because all these toxins left the fat cells and were suddenly dumped into the bloodstream. And guess what the brain is made of? Fat. So they all just went right into his brain and screwed up his memory. So the dirty closets are a real issue. So if you're sensitive to alcohol, you don't want to put any more pressure on your liver. So then you've got like we just talking about difficulty detoxing. Alcohol is just one of those things. The issues are your liver is a washer dryer system, just to get a bit more technical, that there's two phases to I mean, technically there's a third, which they keep kind of re putting the clothing back in the washer dry system, but that's called phase 3. But for our purposes, it's phase 1 and 2. What happens is that you have a dirty shirt, and you put it in the washer, and that's phase 1. And you put it in the dryer, and that's phase 2. And if it goes through the dryer all good, you have a nice clean shirt, and you can go use it again. So the problem is that if you wash that shirt only and you don't put it in the dryer because the dryer is broken, or it's too full, or it's slow, or you're missing components for the floor, it's the wrong dryer. There's technically like 6 different dryers in the liver, 6 different major detox pathways. Then the shirt that was dirty but now is washed, and then if you don't dry it, it's going to get moldy, which means it was worse than if you never washed it in the first place. And that's what a Herx reaction is. A Herx reaction is you detox things, and it's the detox, the partially detoxed version is now more dangerous than the undetoxed toxin itself. So like benzene, for example, is very dangerous. But when you put it through phase 1, the washer, but not the dryer, it's now a benzene oxide radical, which is now 100 times worse than just the benzene itself. So this is a real problem, and why people have Herx reactions or multiple chemical sensitivities, because their dryers are stuck. So when you have a variation, a green or a red dot in phase 1, that means your washer is acting extra fast. It's pushing things through the laundry too fast for the dryer to catch up, while a red yellow dot in the dryers means it's slower. So if you have a variation, a red or yellow dot in the dryer, that means that your now dryers are slower. So if you combined faster washers and slower dryers, you have a huge problem, which means you cannot detox properly. And then you get all these extra toxins circulating, and then they stuff the fat cells, and then can create inflammation, which then can create the water retention. There's all sorts of ways that toxins can put on weight. And then there's the additional nuance that there's some particular genes, you saw some of them before, that are specific to estrogen clearance, and that can create its own weight gain, because now you have excess estrogen, which puts on weight. And then this is a screen that describes where you get exogenous or external estrogens, like heated plastics, cleaning products, soy, antibiotics found in meats, pesticides, alcohol, unfiltered city water due to birth control pills in the city water, which is kind of gross, makeups and body lotions, terrible sources of estrogen. And then there's internal sources of high circulating estrogen. We already mentioned some of them. excess visceral body fat, liver overwhelm. And then there's also hidden infections and dysbioses that can recirculate estrogen. If you have bad bacteria in the gut, your liver, and then the estrogen, detox estrogen floats by. Like your liver's gone through this big process through the washer and dryer to put detox estrogen into the bile to then be put into the large intestine to then be pooped out. But if certain bad bacteria see that detox estrogen float by, grab it, undetox it, remove the add the things that were added onto the estrogen to make it detoxifiable, then that bacteria will use the estrogen and spit it back into the bloodstream, and the liver sees like, what are you doing? I just detoxed you. What's going on? So there's other things that can create estrogen windup. And depending on your genetics, you may or may not have an easier time trying to detox estrogen. Then we go into calories. So this is the third main cause, and we're going to cover all the sub causes underneath them. So eating the wrong amount of carbs for your genetics. So this is what I call the find your ideal diet. This is learning about your carb tolerance. Are you keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb? And this is not a variation test. Are you green, yellow, or red? That's not this. This is a duplication test. This is looking at the number of duplicates of the gene that breaks down carbohydrates, specifically the AMY1 gene, the one that produces amylase in the saliva. So if your gut is a fort and carbs are Visigoths charging the fort, these genes are the cannons lining the fort to keep the carbs at bay. And the version of the cannon matters less than the number of cannons. So, and this is one of the very few cases where the difference between green, yellow, and red dots doesn't really mean much. So I'm just picking numbers out of the air. The green cannon shoots 100 cannonballs, an hour. The yellow does 95 and the red does 90. So if you're concerned about carbs, I would much rather have 6 red cannons at 90 firing rate each versus 1 green cannon at 100. And so that's why the number of cannons matters way, 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 way more than the version of it. So we don't even bother to test for the version of it. It's just the duplicates of it. And this is also why we can't, get this particular gene test off of 23andMe or Ancestry. That this is a separate swab to a separate lab analysis and just separate to figure this out. So if you are eating too many carbs for your carb tolerance, you will get indigestion and inflammation in your gut. You just simply can't tolerate it, and that will lead to the water retention because you're over consuming carbs in a way that you genetically can't handle. So like people can have between 1 and 20 of these copies. I am a 2 out of 20. I have the second lowest possible. So I'm basically keto bordering paleo. And then there's people who are Mediterranean and in the shades of gray of Mediterranean, like a 5 is different from an 8, but still kind of within the Mediterranean style. And then there's higher carbs. And I had the second lowest I could have, and I was having terrible digestive problems. And I was eating a perfect Portlandia Mediterranean diet. And it turned out, which was about a 6 or 7 or so on the scale, but I'm actually a 2. So within 1 week of changing this, my digestive problems of 20 years went away. Then we've got the overeating due to having anxiety and depression from having caffeine-induced anxiety and depression. So not all anxiety and depression is due to something psychological. It could just be chemical from having particular genes that make it hard for you to detox caffeine. I have this. I have a big red dot here. So I got off caffeine to help reduce my anxiety and depression. So I'd stop fidget eating. So caffeine is so widely consumed. This may be a hidden source of extra weight because people don't realize the caffeine is causing anxiety and depression, which then leads to overeating. Then we have low satiety genes, meaning that fullness is not in the stomach, it's in the brain. And there's a gene that regulates the signal from the stomach to the brain that you're full. So if there's a red dot or a yellow dot, there's a slowing of that signal to the brain, which means that you're not able to register that you've eaten enough. So in this case, when you have genes that are controlling behavior, then what you do is you don't focus on your willpower, you focus on changing your environment. So, for example, I have this gene and variation. So I just don't keep bread in the house. Like I'm not stronger than bread, but I'm smarter than bread. So I just don't keep it in the house. So I change my environment so I don't need willpower. If I have a thing of bread in the kitchen, like that's gonna be gone or half gone within the day. So if I just change my environment, then willpower is not an issue. So for people who've got genetic variations around their eating behaviors, which will show a couple more around sugar consumption, control your environment, not your willpower. That is the main message. And it may be frustrating, but that's the way it is. You're not going to win against your genetics, particularly if you're worn down, like you're sleep deprived or stressed out, or you've traveled a lot, or you just finished a big project, and or whatever it might be. It's like your willpower will erode eventually, and you'll cave to your genetics. So just control the environment so you don't even have the opportunity to cave, even if you don't have very low willpower. Then we've got the craving of sugar. So some people genetically crave more sugar, and that can be a source of unnecessary calories leading to weight gain. So it's the same concept. It's like control your environment, not your willpower. And there's some other foods and herbs that can help with sugar cravings. Now, technically, things like dates and prunes can help with sugar cravings, but those things can be overeaten. Any of these can be abused in their own right. Like 70% chocolate. It's like, oh, look, I'm fighting sugar cravings by having lots and lots and lots and lots of chocolate. No, 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 and no. I've tried that. It doesn't work. It's just fooling oneself. So the main thing here is just to be honest with oneself. Then we've got over consuming sugar. That's another genetic variation. So people who genetically maybe just I mean, there's the people who crave sugar but have a green dot in consumption. These are the people that crave sugar but just can have one little square of chocolate and they're done. They're good. I hate these people. I mean, because I like will stuff myself because I crave sugar and can overconsume it. I mean, I'm a former sugar addict, but like the people just have one little thing and they're just all good. It's so frustrating for someone like me that genetically doesn't have that option. But if people are really over consuming, and especially if they have the green dot and they're over consuming, you have to ask yourself, okay, am I emotionally eating? Is there an underlying metabolic disorder like blood sugar issues? Is there a gut infection that's eating the calories in your behalf, making you crave calories? Are there mineral nutrient deficiencies that are parading as sugar cravings, or is there mitochondrial damage where your body can't burn fat properly, so it's leaning on sugar for its energy source? Then we have preferring to add more fat to your food as a flavor and a texture. Some people crave more fat because fat is not just a calorie source, it's a flavor and a texture. And some people just crave more of it, like me. And, eating more fat is not necessarily a bad thing as long as it's really high quality fats. And the issues around that is that if people are eating really, really bad fats, that's definitely a problem. Or if they're eating fats that are rancid, that's definitely a problem. So here's an example. Here's a page I put together of what the good fats are. That's in green and versus the bad fats in red. And then uh, there's people who, and you got to protect your fats. So fats can be damaged in 6 different ways: light, heat, time, air, plastic bottles, and toxic exposure. So even getting high quality fats, you still got to protect them because fats are very, very fragile. Now there's the difficulty burning fat. So now we're talking about the caloric fat weight, can you burn the fat that's on your body if it is fat? Not if it's toxins, not if it's water weight, but if it's actually fat, that's just calories. Some people have genetic problems burning the fat to create energy in the mitochondria. This is a picture of a schematic of the mitochondria. Can you actually throw fat into the furnace for energy? And then additionally, can you throw fat into the furnace to generate heat like a bear? Can you make brown fat? So brown fat is this is how there's a lot of how cold therapy works, is that the cold plunges trigger a lot of brown fat production, and then you can burn fat that way. So those are the causes, genetic causes for excessive weight. There's one, two, three big causes, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 subcategories of how of genetically how people put on excessive weight. And I'll just give you an example. Like, this is my diet matrix. So when people run their genetics with me, they get their version of there's a lot that they get. There's their own diet matrix. Like, this is my combination of the genes around diet and behavior, my carb tolerance, my food triggers, the anti-inflammatory foods. These are all this is just one page out of 50 odd pages of the custom report that's put together for people. And if you are interested in learning about these genetics and getting assessed for yourself, I do this genetics testing. And here's some case studies. I will just pointing out here. She lost 10 pounds. Alfredo lost 27. And he also was able to quit drinking, improve his diet, no more panic attacks. And just to people ask the questions, what's the difference between my tests and the others, is that I really focus on what's practical, not generically just throwing 300 health tips at you and causing overwhelm, confusion, and fear. I have an entire back-end resource library, which I would just briefly show so people can see what it looks like. And so this is the program. And as you can see, like, there's a welcome sequence. And when you get your genetics results back in, an entire section, like here's a long video and a short video of how to go over your report, a whole section of how to understand supplements, including like importance of water, swallowing pills more effectively. And then I go through all the major modules. Like, this is the carb tolerance videos, all the trigger foods like gluten, lactose, salt, alcohol, caffeine, histamine, food allergens, etc. The eating and behaviors modules on satiety. There's more stuff in there than what we talked about. Like, there's bitter. We also focus on the most important genes, not just, whatever is fashionable at the time. These genes have been highly curated for the most upstream important ones. We've got the carb tolerance genes, which the other major tests don't have. That's if you're between a 1 and a 20, the whole carbs charging the fort analogy. And then there's understanding the difference between functional testing like blood, urine, saliva, stool, hair versus genetics. Now, these are all valuable. I do these all the time. I love them. They're great, but it's a different window. And they're also, the genetics is, without even a close second, the single most high value test you can do without even a close second, because you do it once and you're done and the results are for life. If you do like a stool test, you have to retest in 6 to 12 months. You do a mitochondria test, you retest 6 to 12 months. Genetics, it's once done. So if you plan on living 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 more years, whatever you invest in today on genetics is absolutely trivial when amortized over the value of your life. And because this test is valuable for life. So I highly encourage people to think about the investment in genetics amortized over years and years and years. The testing is super simple. It is crazy simple. Mail you the genetics cheek swab. You can do it in less than 5 minutes, and we give you the self-addressed stamped envelope to mail it back to us. Explained in the reports, as well as the large video section that goes over this carb tolerance. So the numbers 2 to 20 or 1 to 20, they're actually very practical. So, and I'm the only one, I believe, in the entire ecosystem of this genetics test that's figured this out practically. So this is true. I was watching Game of Thrones, and I was trying to figure out this genetic puzzle. Welcome to my brain. I try to solve genetic things watching Game of Thrones. And the problem is that in the Game of Thrones, there's a dwarf named Tyrion, played by Peter Dinklage, one of the best actors in the whole series. And then there's a guy named the Mountain. His name's Bjorn, because obviously he's like from Viking descent. He's literally the strongest man in the world. He lifted 501 kgs. That's over 1,000 pounds. They're friends in real life. And so Peter is a dwarf. Bjorn is a legit giant. He's enormous. Now, technically, both of them can be a 2. Both of them, or a 6, or whatever. So you can't just say, oh, you're a 6. That means you need 600 calories of carbs because you're a 6. Okay, that 600 calories would be too much for Peter and barely fit between Bjorn's front teeth. So that doesn't work. So how do you account for someone's genetics, but also their individual body size? And then I realized when I was watching Peter act on Game of Thrones, like, oh, he's a dwarf. I used to teach X-ray analysis, which is true. I used to teach, and we learned a lot about dwarf skeletal anatomy because they have different bone structure, and particularly their fingers. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, fingers, but oh, what it grows approximately with weight and height, and it's finger size. So Peter's longest finger is probably 3/4 the length of my pinky, while Bjorn's longest finger is probably 3/4 the length of my forearm. So what that means is that the numbers are connected to the two is I'll call it the finger rule. So if I'm a two, which I am, I can get 2 fingers worth of higher carb foods per meal maximum, or 4 fingers worth of lower carbs. So high carb versus low carb foods are like, it's the difference between a Gala or a Honey Crisp apple and a Granny Smith apple. It's the difference between carbs and between grains and beans, or grains and nuts. Or it's the difference between like potatoes and like squash. So potatoes have way more density. They're much higher carbs than squash. So then we look at, what does a higher carb diet look like? These are people who are like 8s and 9s and above. And so those are eight fingers worth. Or if they're higher than that, then it's basically their whole hand. So I look at, your fist is roughly 10 fingers worth of size. And I don't recommend people go over that amount if you're a 10 or more. So people are 10 or more, like this is the amount, their fist is the amount of carbs that they can have heavy carbs they can have as a maximum per meal. So that's what I mean by a high carb diet. And so as you can see, getting the genetics number is really critical, but then how do you customize it to someone's height and weight? And I figured it out. It's the finger rule, and no one else, to my knowledge, has figured this out. And it's literally a rule of thumb, or it's really at hand to how to customize your results to you. So I hope that helped.